This story starts with me moving to a new hostel in Sydney. I'd been solo traveling Sydney for about 8 days at this point. I'd been staying in a hostel on one side of the city and decided to move to a new hostel on the other side of the city to force myself to get a different experience before I left. I was staying in a 4-person room, so just 2 bunk beds. This hostel actually assigned people beds. Most hostels I've stayed at just give you a room and say to take an empty bed, but not this one. I was assigned bed D, which was one of the bottom bunks. The bed was totally empty and clean. I put my sheets on, laid my bags down on the bed, and then headed out. I got back later that day and made my way to my room to relax. When I opened the door, I noticed one of my roommates was in there and he was looking at his bed. He was an English guy whose name I cannot remember. There were a bunch of clothes on his bed, and he asked me if they were mine. I told him no, and then he just threw them on the ground. I thought they were his, but I guess not. Once I sat down on my bed, he looked at me and said that bed was already taken by a French couple. I was pretty confused by this, as the bed was totally empty when I got there, and it's the one I was given. I told him this and asked if maybe they had left that morning. He said there was no way because all their bags were still all over the room. Then he had to leave before I could really ask him any more questions. I read a bit more on the paper with the rules they gave me when I checked in, and it said that if you sleep in a bed where you were not assigned, they'll charge you a fine on the spot. Also, the top 2 bunks were a total mess, so I knew I had to stay here. I decided to just stay in the room for the rest of the day to edit pictures and wait for this mystery French couple to show up so we could figure out what was going on. They never did. By 10 o'clock, I said, screw it, and just went to bed. I thought maybe the English guy was trying to mess with me because no one else showed up the whole day, and I doubt the hostel would give me a bed that was already taken if they're so serious about it that they're willing to fine you for staying in the wrong bed. I was honestly getting a really good sleep when suddenly around 1 a.m. I was woken up by someone shaking me. I looked up to see a man, probably in his mid-20s. He looked at me and said, "You're in my bed," in a very heavy French accent. I had actually been ready just in case this happened and saved the paper that told me which bed I was assigned. I pulled it out from under the bed and showed him I was assigned to this bed. He was actually pretty calm about it and said there must just be some kind of a mistake. He left the room saying he'd go find someone from management to talk about this. After he left, his girlfriend came in and I showed her my paper. She said she knew what had happened. They'd been there a week and were both assigned the top 2 bunks, but no one was on my bed, so they just took it so that they could be on the bottom and sleep together. For whatever reason, the top 2 bunks were extremely dirty. It looked like they'd just been using them to throw their dirty shoes and clothes up onto. The girl said they couldn't sleep on them because they were too filthy. Then she went to go find her boyfriend. I was just rolling with it at this point, waiting for a manager to tell them they were in the wrong and to find them. A few minutes later, the French guy returned alone. He was now very upset. He sat down and told me he couldn't find a manager and that I need to get out of his bed. He was very straightforward about it. He kept saying how it's not his problem and I need to move beds or just take my stuff and leave. I told him I paid for this bed and had proof it was the bed I was given, that I was not going to leave. I had nowhere to go. He just continued on yelling that he was drunk and tired and needed to sleep, but he can't because I'm in his bed. He said many times that it's not his problem. In the middle of this, the English guy suddenly came into the room. He listened to what was happening and defended me, saying it was my bed and it isn't my fault that they were using the wrong bed this whole time. The French guy didn't care at all. He was getting more angry and loud, yelling over and over it isn't his problem. Suddenly his girlfriend opened the door and yelled at him in French. I have no idea what she said, but he shut up right away and left the room with her. I was pretty shaken at this point. I was trying to keep calm as I knew yelling back would do absolutely nothing to help me. I talked to the English guy for about 20 minutes and calmed down. He told me that this was actually the French people's last night here. I decided I would try to clean the top bunk as best I could and sleep there for one night just so we could all go to sleep. This wasn't worth it. When the French guy came back, I told him I'd just give him the bed for the night. But now he was totally calm and very nice to me. He said he knows it isn't my fault and that I should keep the bed. He said he found someone who works at the hostel to talk to. He was calm, but clearly angry at the same time. He kept saying he'd make the hostel pay for double-crossing him and that he was going to stay up all night to make life horrible for the worker he found. The guy just could not take responsibility for the mistake they had made and needed someone to take it out on. He also said the worker had called the police and that they were on their way, which for some reason he was very happy about, not really sure why. He then left, The English guy and I laughed about it because honestly, this was a really crazy situation. And now that it was seemingly over, it was just immediately funny. We tried to sleep, but about an hour later, the French girl and some new girl who we'd never seen before came into the room. They both changed bed sheets on the top bunks and slept there through the night. The next morning, the two girls gathered up all their things and left without saying a word to either of us. The English guy said he had no idea who the new girl was. He hadn't seen her the whole week they had been there. Also, we never saw the French guy again. I'm guessing he was arrested, but I actually have no idea. Some people I've told this story to said I should have tried to get my money back for that night at the hostel, but I mean it was like $15. And the owner of the hostel actually came and apologized to me personally, which I thought was super cool of him because honestly, it wasn't even the hostel's fault. This only happened because the couple ignored which beds they were given and then wanted to fight about it. Also, I just thought it was a funny story. Well worth the $15 I spent. I left 2 playlists for you guys to check out. One goes to the rest of my story times and one goes to all my Australia videos. I'll see you over on one of those. Thanks for watching.